Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be covering the BCBA Test Content Outline 6th edition, and I'm just going to be covering A.1. So A.1 is identify the goals of behavior analysis as a science, description, prediction, control. And I essentially made this just to kind of help myself and others prepare for the exam. So I'm going to be giving some definitions, some examples, and some mock questions, and the explanation for the answer. If you're like me, I think videos are very helpful, examples are very helpful, and then learning how to actually apply the knowledge instead of just memorizing the definition is going to be crucial. So that's why I wanted to create something that really helped to do those specific things. Okay, let's see, how do I move this? Okay, so I want to start by just kind of going over why it's important. Why is description, prediction, and control important? Because they represent 3 progressive levels of scientific understanding that we as clinicians are going to be using to effectively and ethically change behavior. So these are things that, you're not just memorizing the definitions, but you're also going to be using in practice to use the evidence-based science and scientific understanding and ensuring that you do it in the way that it's meant to be done, right? Okay, so the first one is description. It is the most basic level of understanding in the science of ABA, and it requires us to objectively observe and document the facts of a behavior. So it should be observable and a measurable fact. The description gives us knowledge of the facts of the event, which we can then use to begin to form a hypothesis. So here I have an example. Joe hits his brother when he tries to play with his toys. This is observed to happen 3 times, right? So I just gave a brief description of the observable facts. There's no feelings, there's no emotions or assumptions involved. It is just factual, observable, and measurable. And then I did take this quote directly from the Cooper book, but I did like the way that it was laid out. Descriptive knowledge consists of a collection of facts about the observed events that can be quantified, classified, and examined for possible relations with other known facts. This can suggest a possible hypothesis and enable scientists to describe it accurately. So going a step further and thinking about when we would actually be using description is actually when you write your operational definitions of a behavior, right? We're going to be writing that observable, measurable fact of the behavior. And so that's just another time we'd use it. And then here's like a quick guide. So how do we know if something is a fact? Is it observable? Can it be seen, felt, heard, or reported? Is it objective? Deals with facts rather than personal feelings, interpretations. Is it operational? Does everyone agree that it occurred? So I always like to think of description as the foundational step. It's the what. We are just directly observing and documenting the facts of a behavior. Okay, so prediction, the second level of understanding. So the second level of understanding occurs when repeated observations reveal that 2 events consistently occur with each other. Prediction occurs when a repeated observation starts to indicate a correlation between the 2 events, anticipating future occurrences as well. So here's an example. After observing Joe hitting his brother when he grabs his toys, we hypothesize that Joe will continue to hit his brother to access the tangible. So every time Joe hits his brother gives the toy back and the hitting stops. So we can now predict that Joe will likely hit his brother again when his brother grabs his toys. So in this scenario, we have gone a step further from just the observable behavior of Joe is hitting his brother. Now we start to notice that it happens when his brother takes the toy, it happens when his brother grabs his toys. So we've also noticed that when Joe hits his brother and he gives the toy back, his hitting stops. And then, let's see, I think I'm just going to go into the third to explain where I'm getting at. So control, now this is the highest level of scientific understanding. A functional relation exists when an experiment demonstrates that a specific change in one event, dependent variable, is reliably produced by specific manipulations of another event, the independent variable, and that change is not the result of extraneous factors, aka confounding variables. So, to establish control, the independent variable must be manipulated, leading to a change in the dependent variable, or environmental modification, and repeated manipulation establishes more experimental control or functional relation, but it's not always done. So here's an example that is kind of going off the other previous example. So now we implement an intervention, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, where Joe must ask his brother for the toy back, the alternative acceptable behavior, and we withhold reinforcement for hitting, so we don't allow Joe's brother to give him the toy back. Then after 2 weeks, the hitting behavior decreases and eventually stops. This demonstrates control over the behavior, improves causation. So that's the third level. That's the highest level of scientific understanding, and it does in fact confirm the cause and effect relationship. So now let's get into a little mock question. I did have ChatGPT write this one for me, I will admit, but I obviously read it and made sure that it made sense. Because I do have some like BCBA mock exam questions, but I don't want to steal them from the other sources. So we're using ChatGPT. But what I do want to highlight is that I like the way that these questions are written from ChatGPT, because it still follows that same test taking or that scenario-based question that you're going to see in your exam, which is going to be, how you apply your knowledge. Not really, you're not going to see a question. I mean, maybe you could, but it's not very likely that you would see a question that just directly asks you, like, what are the 3 levels of scientific understanding? Like, that is very unlikely. It's good to know them. Obviously, like, you do have, the first step is to learn them and memorize them and understand them. That's why I think the examples help understand them. But then the third or fourth layer is just seeing the scenario and understanding, like, which one of these does it belong to. Okay, enough rambling. BCBA is conducting a school consultation. Over 2 weeks, they record data indicating that whenever a student is given a multi-step math worksheet, they tear up the paper. The data also show that on days when the student has a one-on-one aide present, the paper tearing behavior does not occur, regardless of the worksheet length. The BCBA notes a strong co-occurrence between the absence of the aide and the presentation of a multi-step math worksheet and the behavior. Which level of scientific understanding has the BCBA achieved? So I'll give you some time to think or pause, and then we can go into the answers. So the answer is B, prediction. And I also like ChatGPT because it gives you an explanation of why. So B is correct because the BCBA has noted that pattern and the correlation between those environmental variables, the absence of the aid, and the task presentation and the behavior. So now she can anticipate when the behavior will occur, right? So she's just at the second level, but she hasn't quite reached the third level of control where she is manipulating the IV and the DV, or the IV, and seeing that functional relation. And she hasn't started to implement an intervention to demonstrate that. So, and it's also not a description, because if it was description, it would have just stopped at, they tear up the paper, or they record data indicating that whenever a student is given a multi-step math worksheet, they tear up the paper. That would be simply description, if that's all they gave you. All right, let's go to the second question. Marcus, a behavior analyst, wants to prove that his token economy system is the direct cause of an increase in on-task behavior for a client. He takes baseline data, implements the token economy, and sees a sharp increase in the behavior. To fulfill the highest goal of the behavior analysis as a science, what should Marcus do next? A, meticulously define and describe the topographical components of the on-task behavior. No. Continue the token economy across several weeks to predict future trends of on-task behavior. Withdraw the token economy temporarily to see if the on-task behavior returns to baseline levels. Sorry, I should have named what letter I was on. D, cross-reference his client's data with similar published studies to ensure his results are conceptually systematic. It's definitely a trick there. Okay, so to fulfill the highest goal is definitely the most important part to know of this question. To fulfill the highest goal, what should he do next? So far he's already taken baseline data, he's already implemented the token economy, and he has seen a sharp increase in behavior. So the answer is C, withdraw the token economy temporarily to see if on-task behavior returns to baseline levels. Because if we want to prove a functional relation, then we have to establish control by manipulating the independent variable so that we can say that the change is due to that it's due to the token economy. And then here is ChatGPT's explanation. So the highest goal is obviously discovering that functional relation, and he needs to manipulate, I cannot speak today. He needs to manipulate the independent variable, the token economy. So by him withdrawing it, he is doing an ABA design reversal, and he can prove that the behavior changes only because of his intervention. So yeah, that one is pretty good. I don't really, A only describes description. Yeah. Topography is how the behavior looks, so that is just describing what it looks like. B, the key word here is predict future trends, so that was going to obviously be prediction. And then D is obviously just wrong because conceptually systematic has nothing to do with the highest goal of behavior analysis. So yeah, those are my questions and answers. I hope that was helpful, and I definitely will say that after doing some of my own mock questions from other really good, really strong sources, some of the questions can be maybe that easy, but some of them are a little bit harder and require a little bit more critical thinking. The answer will not be as straightforward. Sometimes it will really be between one or two, because it just depends on the scenario, right? It can be a scenario that is like a real life scenario. It can be a clinical scenario. It can be a couple things like that. So that's why I think it's really important to just have a couple examples of what to look out for, and, you know, paying attention to specific wording to truly be able to do the best that you possibly can do on the exam. And yeah, follow along for some other task list review items. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.